Hello, St. Louis. Welcome to Fertile in St. Louis. I'm Dr. Emily Hecker, live here on this Friday morning to talk about fatigue. What is fatigue? Tiredness. So we're going to talk about fatigue today, certain ways to combat fatigue, how you can combat fatigue, and how it really is going to be impacting fertility. This Facebook Live series is all about fertility, how to impact it, and one of the big things that can be sabotaging your fertility, and even if you're not trying to get fertile, say it's your partner, is sleep, fatigue, how we're feeling. Why do we feel tired all the time? So I'm excited to bring you guys some ways that I approach fatigue in my practice, in my functional medicine practice in Baldwin, and what I do. And these are some really, key strategies here. This is like basics, but it's really important. And one of the first steps that I do when I work with really almost all of my patients here. So we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. I have 9 different things that we're going to go over here today. So grab your notebooks if you don't already have them out, or just watch this while you're doing something, doing laundry, or doing dishes, whatever it is. I'm excited that you're here. So let's get started on some certain ways. So one of the biggest things that I find that I could spend probably a really long time discussing, got to turn my phone off, sorry about that, is diet. So when you are fatigued, when you are tired all the time, one of the biggest things is going to be how you are eating. And you might have already picked up on this, maybe you haven't already, but what this is how much food you're eating, how much sugar you're eating, especially in this holiday season around Christmas time, and lots of holiday parties and everything like that. We need to look at how many carbs, how much protein, and how much fat are you putting in your body, because that is going to give you the ultimate way to experience fatigue or not. And a lot of us don't realize that the fatigue can be coming from the portioning of foods that we eat. And we blame it on something else. We blame it on our kids. We blame it on getting up too early. We blame it on whatever you may be blaming it on. But the first place that I always like to start, especially when we're looking at optimizing and really getting our body healthy, is going to be how much fat, carbs, and protein. Now, those 3 things are called macronutrients. Macronutrients are the 3 main things. If you take food and you turn the label over, if it has a label, turn it over and look at it, and you can see it divides it into 3 different things: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. There's some other things on the label that you'll see there, but those are the 3 biggest things that we look at in food. And what I want you to look at and start getting, just becoming aware of when you're putting in your body is how much carbohydrates are you eating in that. And so let's stick on carbohydrates for a little bit, because carbs, they get a bad rap, and they can be pretty bad for us when we eat them in uncontrollable amounts. And too many times it's just too common that we're just craving those carbs. And we say carbs, what do you think of? Is a question. That's what I ask people. What do you think of when you hear carbohydrates? And I would bet that you hear things such as pasta and breads and all kinds of things, goody cookies, that you think of during the holiday season. So what do you think of when you hear carbohydrates? I'd love to hear it from you. The first thought, because I think this is a really valid point, that when we think of carbohydrates, we already have a stigma. We already kind of brand it in our own brain of what is a carbohydrate. So yeah, if you know one, please pop it in there and we can see. So carbohydrates are going to actually be those things that we've mentioned. So the pastas, the breads, the cookies, all that jazz. But also carbs can also come from fruit. And a lot of times fruit gets such a wonderful reputation of being super healthy and full of nutrients. But when we break it down to look what's actually in fruit, especially some of the things, the common things that we put in smoothies in the morning, bananas and apples, we can think that we're doing ourselves and our body a good, but when we kind of calculate how much that breaks down into our body, it becomes a lot. So did you know that there's 25 grams of carbohydrates in a banana when you put that in your smoothie, or eat it as a snack, as a little pick-me-up thing? So we want to be aware that certain fruits can actually increase our sugar intake, which in turn can tank us later in the day. So when you're combating fatigue, we gotta make sure we are aware of what we're putting in our body as far as sugar content. What I love to challenge you with is, this is one of my takeaways here, is to track what you are eating. That is huge. If you are not already tracking what you are putting in your body, this is something that you need to do, especially if you're wanting to become fertile and have a baby, is really see how your body is managing those sugars is another key part of that. So, so that's carbohydrates. Now, you also want to focus on increasing your most likely increasing your protein consumption and your fat consumption. So once again, this is just general advice, not specific to you, individually watching this, but we want to bring in the right amounts of fats, the right amount of protein, so we can combat that fatigue. I also want to bring in a little bit of science here and talk about what carbohydrates do to our body with glucose and with our pancreas with insulin. So what happens when we consume sugar is it breaks down into glucose. Glucose then has to be paired with a hormone called insulin that is pumped out and produced from your pancreas. When it is pumped out from your pancreas, they have to pair together like a little team, and then they have to go and they have to knock on the door to your cells, and your cell gate has to actually let them in. This is an insulin receptor. So you have these receptors that wait for that team to come and launch on that that land on that launching pad. They land on that together, and then it opens up the gate so they can get into the cell. So the glucose can do its thing to give you your energy to pump out and create more ATP or energy so you feel alive. So, and have energy. So we need this whole pairing system to go up with how your pancreas is working with insulin. Diabetics is a whole nother topic, and diabetes is a whole nother topic, but what happens, we have too many carbs, and you're balancing that insulin player out. So we want to make sure that your insulin levels are not too high. When your insulin is high, one of the things that's going to be doing with you, it's actually going to give you the response to store fat when your insulin is high. And we don't, well, some of us may want that, but I sure don't. A lot of us don't, because fat is inflammatory. So we want to burn our fat for fuel, which is kind of the concept in a ketogenic style diet, where you want to burn fat for fuel, whether it's your fat or whether it's the fat from an exogenous source that you're consuming. So that is a huge component. And I would say half of this Facebook Live just on fatigue is going to be on dietary control. You will find that if you have too many sugars, too many carbs throughout your day, you will crash. Whether it's in the middle of the day, you need a nap, or whether it's when you're putting your kids to bed at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and you actually fall asleep with them. And sometimes that's my signal for myself. When I start falling asleep with my kids, I knew I had exceeded my carbohydrate tolerance for the day. It was too much for me. My body just tanks with that. So making sure that you're tracking that is big. What I was saying, my biggest challenge for you is to track it. My favorite tool to use is MyFitnessPal. I'm going to put this in the links in the comments below. It's a free app. You probably have heard of it if you're on social media. If you haven't, get it. It's free. But it tracks your macros. It tracks how many carbs, fats, protein you're eating. It tracks the food. So it's the biggest food log out there. Super easy ways. I even have some videos that I've created on my website at enlightenedstl.com in the video section on how to actually make an account with MyFitnessPal, how to do a barcode scan reader. You just take your phone and you just scan it, and it, bam, it pops up and populates. So you can track it easy. If you don't know what you're doing, then you're not going to get the data to know what's not working for you. So that is huge with that. So that's the diet piece. There are some other ways that can cause fatigue in your body, which is going to be looking at anemias. Anemia means lack of oxygen. And there's different ways that your body can be anemic. A lot of times people will hear of anemias and they will think, usually think iron gets the biggest reputation of being anemic. So a lot of times people will think iron, but there's many different ways. I think there's 7 different types of formulations of anemia. The 3 of them that I see the most in my practice when I run blood work. So this is how you're going to know if you're anemic, is if you work with a provider that is looking at your blood work and can look at these numbers appropriately. So B12 anemia, B12 and folate, which is a much, much, much needed nutrient, especially when we're talking about methylation, especially when we're talking about reproduction of cells, and especially when in fertility. Methylation is huge, and it requires one of the key vitamins is B12, and there's different forms of B12 that you can get in your prenatal. We're going to get this a little bit in a later Facebook Live video on how to choose the best prenatal and what to look for in that prenatal, what should you be seeing. But B12 is huge, and that can show up in your CBC if your primary care doc or your functional medicine doc orders that for you, looking for B12 anemia. If you do not have oxygen, you're going to feel fatigued. So we need all the little ingredients ready to make the best form of a red blood cell to carry that oxygen. So what are some more ingredients that you need to make a red blood cell? You need iron. Iron, if you have really heavy periods, really heavy bleeding, if you have fibroids, things like that, that can create more of an iron depletion. Something else that can create more of an iron depletion is going to be any pathogenic bacteria. Bacteria love to eat iron. It's their food source. It's one of their food sources. So if you notice that your iron is really depleted in your lab work, you can start thinking of a couple different ways why that's depleted, or work with a practitioner that can help you figure that out. But iron is also going to be one of the reasons why you may feel fatigued. If you consume iron and you feel worse, stop it and work with your provider. If you take B12 and you feel worse, stop it and work with your provider. I see a lot of people come my way that do this, and they're really sensitive and their body can't tolerate those. So just be aware there are other ways to really combat fatigue. Is the diet. You can start doing that today. Go down and download that app, MyFitnessPal. With the anemia piece, get out your old blood work. If your doc doesn't give you your blood work to look at, request it. Inquire. It's yours. You own that lab work, and check things out. Investigate it yourself. But if you don't know what to do, look for a provider in your area that is specializing in this particular thing. There's also another anemia called anemia of chronic disease, and this is an interesting one because it means there's too much inflammation in the body. And when there's too much inflammation, it can look at and show certain patterns in your blood work, and it can actually represent kind of be a little mixed anemia. So we want to combat the anemia component of fatigue by making sure you're not anemic, because if you are, you may not feel very well with that. Thyroid is another way that you might feel a little fatigued. So once again, work with your provider to check your thyroid, because maybe you're dealing with a subclinical hypothyroid. Maybe you're dealing with a undiagnosed autoimmune thyroid component. So in those certain cases, you want to ask for certain markers. And one of them is TPO, thyroid peroxidase antibodies, as well as thyroglobulin antibodies. Those things you want to check, because a lot of docs don't run those particular panels unless they feel the need to. But those are autoimmune markers. And a lot of women who are hypothyroid, meaning that their TSH shoots up and they feel more fatigued, weight gain, they just don't have the energy that they used to. You got to check the thyroid markers out. That's a big one. So thyroid is going to be another one of your things that might sabotage you and getting you feeling more fatigued. There's another component here. We have mitochondrial fatigue. All right, let's get into a little bit with this, because mitochondria are basically, let me see if I have, I don't think I have it here. I used to have a little picture of a mitochondria, a little handheld one that I like to show. I'm very visual. I like colors and pictures and tactical. But anyway, mitochondria are little parts of so you have a cell, right? All of your cells, they have mitochondria. Mitochondria is the part of the cell intracellularly that's going to pump out and make energy in your body. So we need our mitochondria to be on par. We need them to be working really nicely to give us energy. If we're struggling with any type of disease or any type of chronic illness that might suppress our mitochondrial production, that's a bad thing, and we don't want that. So some things to keep in mind when you're just trying to figure out, why am I so fatigued all the time? Why am I so tired? Is to look at your mitochondrial function. There's some different really neat tests that I personally do in my office to look at that, mitochondrial fatigue. But chronic illness can actually cause mitochondrial production to tank. So chronic illness, what are some chronic illnesses that we look for? So biotoxin illness is something that I am really seeing a lot more in my patient population. What is biotoxin illness? Sounds crazy, right? It is, and it's very damaging to the human that has it. But what that is, it can be stimulated from is toxins that actually, bio means living, toxins that are actually living inside of your body, producing more toxins. Things like that you get from mold, from water damaged buildings, especially if you have floods. If you even are living in a new house or an old house, if you have a sensitivity to the musty smell, and you just feel horrible when you get in these certain buildings, you just feel so run down. What happens is that biotoxin can actually get into your body, and you may be genetically susceptible, that percentage of people that cannot produce the antibodies to get rid of that biotoxin. Think of it like a mold, like aspergillus, or there's some penicillin types of fungus, stachybotrys. So there's lots of different types of them that your body can get a hold of, and then it starts really, really damaging your mitochondrial function. So we can test for certain mitochondrial markers. There's a lot of different tests for that. One of the tests that I use is an organic acid test from Great Plains. I love to use that when it does assess mitochondrial function from the urine standpoint with that. So looking at biotoxin illness to see if you are one of those susceptible people that have been exposed to mold, mycotoxins. Lyme disease is another one. If you've been exposed to that and you are just, that's kind of tricky to diagnose as well. It's not as simple as just going to your primary and getting some IgG antibodies to the Lyme. It's a lot more complicated to that than to actually say that you are diagnosed with the Lyme. But that can really tank your mitochondrial function. And there's other mitochondrial diseases out there, and more that go beyond my extent, my knowledge, and my scope of practice within functional medicine. So we got to make sure your mitochondria are working real good. We got to make sure they have the right nutrients. So I was going to say, kind of related to the mitochondrial part, fatigue, going to our next way to look at fatigue, is the environment. And it kind of keeps popping up in these little tidbits that we're giving you, is looking at what is going on in your environment that may be affecting how your body is producing things. One of them is the water damaged buildings. If you're living in a facility, whether it's an apartment, whether it's your home, whether it's someone's basement, whether you go visit your mom's house and you stay in the basement, and man, or you just can't tolerate it. So if it's been water damaged in any way, and you are finding that your body feels worse in that environment, or that's when your body started feeling worse when you had the water damage, it's big. So you got to look at your environment to see if there's certain things that you're living in that's affecting you. Even your lighting in your house, or your work that you live in. If you are in an environment where you're getting lots of the lights that are fluorescent, that can really impact your function and your just your liveliness with those particular things. Did you know that fluorescent lights, if they get broke open, they are filled with mercury? Did you know that? That can really impact how your body's detoxing and making you feel worse with that. So you got to look at your environment. You got to look at your air, because if your air is not filtered correctly, if you're working next to a big plant or a big road and it just has lots of exhaust, or you're in your car all day working, you're a driver or you're a truck driver, whatever it is, if you're being exposed to lots of pollution or the environment that you're in with your air, get an air filter. There's a ton of them out there that really are great. You just want to make sure that you got a good HEPA, HEPA air filter. There's lots of great ones. Some other great ones I'll link to this too. Let me make sure I write this down so I remember to link it. Is my favorite one, which is a great one. It's called Austin Air. They are a great air purifier. Intake, no, IQ Air is another one. IQ Air, AIRE, Molecule spelled with a K. Those are some really awesome, fancy air filters that would do a fantastic job with that piece. So you got to look at your environment to see if that's affecting your fatigue as well. Kind of moving on to the next area of why are you so fatigued all the time would be looking at your gut health. And you may have heard this or maybe you haven't, but you got to look at how your body is absorbing the nutrients that you're consuming. If the integrity of the lining of your gut is not working and it's not to par, do you think you're going to be able to absorb the nutrients that you're getting, absorb the prenatal that you're taking, absorb that awesome green salad that you just bought at Whole Foods for 20 bucks? You know, I'm sorry, I do like Whole Foods. But anyway, we want to make sure that your body is going to absorb those nutrients that you're getting from your outside sources. So if you don't think you're absorbing very well, whether you have a diagnosis, any autoimmune disease can impact the integrity of the lining of your gut. Anyone from celiac is a very popular one that you hear that affects the gut. People know. Sometimes people don't even know certain things like Sjogren's can affect you, or RA can affect your gut, or so many different ones that your butt, or autoimmune Hashimoto's. So if you're struggling and you know that you have any type of autoimmune disease, Meniere's, you got weird things going on with your ears and hearing. So we got to look at the integrity of your gut. No matter what autoimmune component you have, 90% of your immune system lives in your gut. Whoa, that's a lot. And so we want to make sure that that gut is absorbing properly. So that's another thing to think about if you're struggling with fatigue is, how am I digesting? How am I absorbing? And if you're not, there's ways to assess that. And this is what I do in functional medicine, is assess that piece to see, you know, what are your anemia markers? Are you anemic because you can't even absorb the B12 that you're eating from the lovely steak that you just ate? Getting those B12 sources in? I don't know. So we got to assess that malabsorption factor. And there's certain markers that I can even look at on blood work that can lend to the fact, are you having malabsorption? Other clues to you is, how is your poop? How does it look? Is it floating? Is it digesting? Is it a nice log, which it should be? Is it little pebbles? What is your poop experience like today? Or is it today? Or is it next week? How often are you pooping? That can give us, I love talking about poop, but there's a lot of ways to look at how your body is absorbing things and how the clues to what can we know based on what your body is telling us with digestion. It's a whole, everything's connected. So if you're not feeling very good, maybe it's because you are just having diarrhea all the time and you're losing electrolytes, which is another reason for fatigue. So let's talk about the electrolyte component as well, because many times, Becky, let's talk shit. I love it. You're fun. I do too. I love it. But electrolytes, this is huge. Talking about poop, if you're going to the bathroom all the time, whether it's urination or whether it's poop, you're losing fluid. So when we think about this in terms of a baby, it's a little different, because when we think we have our baby and they're having vomiting, they have a little virus, they have lots of poop going on, we want to make sure they don't get dehydrated, right? That's something that we think of. We associate dehydration with kids. And so we want to make sure that they're not dehydrated. What do? We go out and we buy Pedialyte for our kids to make sure they're not dehydrated. What's in Pedialyte? Electrolytes. So the child is losing fluid, whether they're vomiting, they have diarrhea, we don't want them to dehydrate it, so we give them Pedialyte. We need to think of that in terms of ourself, because if we are peeing all the time, whether it's because of the 5 coffees we just drank for the day, or we just for some reason we drink lots of water and so we urinate all the time, or we just have chronic diarrhea and nobody can figure us out, or I'm going to the GI doc, whatever it may be. If you're losing fluids in terms of poop, pee, sweat, if you sweat a ton for your work, if you have passionate sex in all the time and you're just sweating like crazy, we got to bring in the electrolytes, folks. Stress. When we're stressed out, we burn through those electrolytes too. So that's one of the biggest things that I find that people need to replete in their diet with anything, living in the year that we are in, because we're stressed out. We try to do things to get our energy levels up and down, whether that may be eating that little piece of candy bar that's on our coworker's desk at 2 o'clock, or if it's to get that afternoon pumpkin spice latte, now a mocha peppermint mappuccino. I don't know, I make him up because I don't go there. I make my own at home. But anyway, you want to go ahead and replete those electrolytes in there. So electrolytes, and I think I even talked about this in my last one, but I love Seeking Health's Brain. I'm going to link it in here as well, because electrolytes are key. You will feel that this is like your little pick me up at that 2 o'clock afternoon. Man, I'm dragging. Try an electrolyte, not a coffee or a candy. You might find that you need the mist. When I say electrolyte, that's sodium, which is salt. And yes, it is salt. We need salt. We're made of salt, folks. We need salt. We need potassium. We need magnesium. We burn through magnesium when we are stressed out and when we are tired, when we're trying to make neurotransmitters, when we're trying to digest properly. We need that magnesium, especially if we're trying to get pregnant and really talk about muscle tone. This is something Dr. Felicity will talk about too in one of our Facebook Lives, is chiropractic care and how magnesium and electrolytes can really help the muscle tone with your body. So we want to bring in the electrolyte component if we are super stressed out and if we're losing fluids from many ends of our body with that piece. So we have proper oxygenation is another piece of why you might be feeling fatigued. And we got to think, are you getting oxygen? Like me, I talk super fast. Am I breathing properly right now? No. So maybe I need to calm down and slow down. There we go. When I talk fast, I don't breathe. And so that's a problem. We need oxygen. See, I'm not even talking right. We need oxygenation. We need oxygen, folks, to log on to our red blood cell, to be delivered to our brain, to be delivered to our tissues. So we need to breathe properly. One of the biggest things to do is to make sure you're breathing properly at night. Now, some people might have what is called sleep apnea, where you stop breathing at night, or their partner might have this. One of the solutions for sleep apnea is a device that they put on their mouth and they sleep with it at night. And it basically gives them the right oxygen to their tissues. And man, if you don't have oxygen, you're going to feel fatigued, which kind of goes hand in hand with the earlier thing we talked about with the anemia. So if you don't have the right ingredients to make a happy red blood cell, to carry the oxygen, if you don't have either one of those two things, oxygen or a happy red blood cell, you're going to feel fatigued. That's a combined word of fatigued and tired. So we want to make sure you're getting oxygenation properly and making sure that you're breathing. There's some really great breathing techniques out there. There's something called the Buteyko breathing technique. And for those of you that suffer with anxiety, can even be a really, really good way and solution, a tool for you to use to balance that anxiety piece if you're super anxious, if you're not doing the right breathing. So that can go a long way with fatigue, is to just make sure you're breathing properly, postures properly, and that you are even getting chiropractic care to allow your tissue to allow you to breathe and use that lung function with that. So oxygenation is huge. Depression can be associated with fatigue as well. So making sure that this is taken care of, and if it's not, why? So just being aware that those are linked as well, and that can be affected by some of those other things. Heather, I see that you love those orange electrolytes. You know, bringing some basic stuff in can really move mountains with you with fatigue. And this is the easiest place to start. And I will say that almost all the patients that I work with, almost all, I can't say all, but almost all of them, if they're coming in with fatigue, we address all of these things that I'm talking about, and man, they just turn around. And that's one of the biggest things that people say is, wow, I have so much energy now. I'm sleeping better. I'm sleeping deeper. So if you struggle with chronic pain, can also be a reason why that you feel fatigued as well. There is a link with the fatigue and chronic pain. So if you're struggling with anything like that, look at chiropractic care, figure out why you're dealing with that chronic pain, get some acupuncture, do whatever it is that your body is going to help you with dealing with that pain. So I hope you got some good tips out of this today. I hope you laughed a little bit because of my stupidity of words. I'm kidding, but maybe you did. So I hope you have a wonderful Friday. Take those concepts, takes the fatigue away. If you like this, share it with your friends. If someone that you know is trying to combat fatigue and maybe some of these things might help them, please share. But guys, I'm so honored to be in front of you today chatting about fatigue. If you want to sign up to our little downloadable, you can go back up to, you're on Facebook, go back up to the sign in and you can sign up and go and get the 10 easy ways to boost fertility. It's our download piece. It's just like 2 pages long, easy read. And give you some little tips there too. So signing off for today. You guys have a great day. We'll see you next week with Dr. Felicity. Have a good one. Bye-bye.